Welcome everyone, Costin here with my review and critique of Elden Ring. Should you play it? Is it worth picking up? And some people have asked me specifically if they should play Elden Ring when they didn't pick up the previous games in the series, when they didn't like them. Well, I played the previous games in the Souls series, Dark Souls 1, 2, 3, didn't much care for Sekiro, tried it, didn't much care for it, didn't play Bloodborne. And my feeling about Elden Ring is that it's the best of the bunch. It has the best balance, best design, best world, best gameplay, and a lot of things going for it that the previous games didn't have going for it. Is it the best entry point to the series? Yes, on multiple levels. It has a better difficulty curve than, say, Dark Souls 1, 2, or 3. It has more gameplay options than those games, where it felt after a point, especially against very challenging bosses, that you were pushed into cheese build mode, or you're going to have an enormously difficult time. Here you have a lot more options in terms of builds. So is Elden Ring worth picking up if you didn't particularly like the previous games in the Souls series? I would say absolutely, but let's be clear what these games are at their core. They're dungeon crawlers, third-person dungeon crawlers. Imagine if you take Diablo 2 or 3, put them in third-person mode, minimize the UI, make some UI changes, make a lot of information, abstract a lot of information from the players, and that's what you get with Elden Ring in large part. And information about gameplay, buffs, debuffs, damage you're doing, the damage you're taking, all kinds of things. Like, there is a minimalist UI in this game, and it works. Are there things in the UI that I don't like? Sure. There are things that could be improved. I think the equipment menu, the inventory menu certainly could use an overhaul, but overall, Elden Ring goes for a particular look, a particular feel, and it does achieve quite a bit with its deliberate design of the game world, about the interface, the story, and all that really draws people in. But before I talk more about that, let's talk about the biggest issue this game has, the PC version. And I know a lot of reviewers are giving this game very high scores, and they're flat out ignoring this issue. When I see PC Gamer giving this game a over 90 score, when the PC version is complete and utter shite, I have to question, what are you giving this game that kind of score for? Because it's certainly not about the PC version running well. The PC version is really badly designed. It's not the worst in the series. Dark Souls 1 easily takes the cake in terms of that, with its internal rendering resolution of 720p and its horrible mouse sensitivity. But Elden Ring is probably the worst that we've had since then. Like, every Souls game has had a pretty poor PC version. Dark Souls 1 had that internal rendering resolution, did not have mouse and keyboard prompts until the remastered version, and has a horrible mouse sensitivity until the remastered version, and just terrible keybinds by default in many ways. Dark Souls 2 was significantly better, 60 FPS, better internal resolution, certain mods you could use to improve the lighting, etc. Was a much better game, but it did have this weird input delay, where if you're, say, holding down a combination of keys, like holding down shift to block and then trying to attack, you just wouldn't attack, and that happened quite often. That was fixed with Scholar of the First Sin, paid DLC for Dark Souls 2. You got the discount if you had purchased the original version of Dark Souls 2, but yeah, it left a very sour taste in the mouth to have to pay money to get a fixed version, or for the fact that we never got keyboard and mouse controls or prompts for Dark Souls 1 until the release of Dark Souls 1 Remastered, for which we had to pay. And then with all of these games, including Dark Souls 3, we didn't have keyboard and mouse prompts until the Remastered and Sekiro. And even in Elden Ring, although we do have mouse and keyboard prompts, you have to go in a menu and select them, which is bizarre to say the least, because pretty much every single game that I've played on PC does so automatically. You pick up a controller, you press a button, the game recognizes that, automatically switches to controller prompts. You pick up a mouse, click a button on that mouse, or click a button on the keyboard, start moving the mouse, the game recognizes that, switches to keyboard and mouse prompts. Elden Ring has you being forced to toggle it for whatever reason, because, quite frankly, I feel they are that lazy. That's how they've always treated their PC versions. What about Dark Souls 3? How was it as a PC version? Well, the controls were significantly better. We didn't have an input delay. We didn't have horrible mouse sensitivity. And the default control setup on mouse and keyboard, the keybinds themselves, were significantly better than either Dark Souls 1, 2, and even Elden Ring, really. But the big problem in Dark Souls 3 is that although it ran well, it didn't have mouse and keyboard prompts, which is annoying, but by that point we had managed to tolerate it, I guess. The real annoying aspect to Dark Souls 3 is that, although it was the best in the series in many ways in that respect, it had this weird micro-stuttering. These games rely on a checkpoint system, right? The game automatically saves at many points, auto-saving quite often. Well, whenever you got an autosave, even if you were offline in Dark Souls 3, you would suffer an FPS slowdown. Now, that is a pretty big deal in this kind of game where your reaction speed needs to be fast to deal with the various attacks on bosses. So all of the games in the Souls series had major issues with the PC version. I always feel that From Software and Namco Bandai really didn't care much for it. They were willing to milk the PC consumer base for all their worth, but put in as minimal effort as they could. And this is, by the way, also what's going on in Elden Ring. There might be, 600,000, 700,000 active daily users on PC according to Steam statistics, but they still put in a minimal amount of effort. And it's not just with the controls. So what's the issue with Elden Ring on PC? Well, the performance is absolutely atrocious. So there's two problems. The first one is the FPS just isn't good enough. This isn't an astounding feat of technical graphics. There are games that look much better than this, including, say, for instance, God of War, which was a console exclusive, a PlayStation exclusive that run much better and look much better in quite a few ways on a technical level. And just our better performance. The performers, they have better FPS, they have better stability, better performance. Now, God of War did launch with a terrible memory leak, but it does seem like that's been improved on. Can we expect any improvements from Namco Bandai and From Software? Not necessarily, given the history of their company. Or if they do launch an improvement, it's probably going to be some paid DLC or some paid version, because that's what they did with Dark Souls 1 and 2. They fixed the problems eventually, but you had to pay to get the fixes. Really frustrating, and shows how these companies view PC gamers in general, and the low effort really they put in initially in these PC versions. So the performance, the FPS, if you're playing this game at maximum, you will not reach the max 60 FPS. And it's annoying though, because even if you reach 60 FPS, you won't go higher because the game is locked at 60 FPS. What? Is it online sync issues? Are they concerned about that? Could be, though I find it a dubious claim. Like, if we have sync issues because some people could potentially play at over 60 FPS, wouldn't we have those same kind of issues if, I don't know, someone's playing at 20, 30 FPS and someone's playing at 60? I don't necessarily believe it. I think that they've locked it at 60 FPS, one, because they put in minimal effort in these versions, and that's the frame rate we get on consoles, I guess. And two, because they are afraid that they might give people in PvP an unfair advantage. Okay, even if I'm willing to accept that argument, which I am not willing to, but even if we were willing to accept that argument, how about this amazing feat? How about if you do summon someone in multiplayer, or you do invade someone in multiplayer, that you then get an FPS limit of 60, but or someone invades your world. But if you're actually just playing on your own, but you're playing online because you want to see all the little messages, the bloodstains, the ghosts, all that on the ground, how about then you could play with more than 60 FPS? Mind you, this game does need a great deal of optimization to maintain that 60 FPS limit, but it is pretty shitty to have a game released in 2022 with a 60 FPS limit. This is not 2010. And I think it really harkens back to how these games were even developed on PC to begin with. There was a petition to Namco Bandai to bring Dark Souls 1 on PC. Total Biscuit, may he rest in peace, used his influence as a YouTuber to put a lot of attention on that petition. It got a lot of attention, got a lot of signatures, and eventually Namco Bandai and From Software released a pretty crappy PC version because of popular demand. And I really think it has its roots in that. In terms of controls, the biggest issue in terms of mouse and keyboard is mouse sensitivity. It just doesn't feel right. I can't really set it up regardless of the DPI or mouse sensitivity where it feels right. Either it's too fast or too slow. Either if it's too fast in the menus and I'm mounting combat and too slow on foot, or it's too or it's fine on foot, but it's too fast, or it's fine on foot, but you have problems elsewhere. So either way, you just aren't going to get the great performance. I think the mouse sensitivity is crappy, and I think it's the worst actually we've seen since Dark Souls 1. Some people are saying, well, I'm playing at 800 DPI. Oh, well, great for you. I mean, I tolerate it, don't get me wrong. I've been playing this game from the very beginning with mouse and keyboard, and I'm playing just fine. I've beaten a significant portion of the game. Not all of it, but a significant portion of the game. I have like 2 major areas to complete in the game. But it is jarring at times, especially with the mounted combat, which can ruin in a major way quite a few boss encounters. Now, some people would say, well, you should clearly play these games with a controller. Why? Because a controller is what these games are designed for? Okay, fair enough. But let me just say this. Why would I play with the controller if I'm not used to playing with a controller? This might come as a shock to a lot of people, but not all of us play console games. I haven't ever owned a console since NES. Really, where I played Mario, pretty much. That's the only time I ever bothered to own a console, personally. Ever since then, I've been an exclusive PC gamer with mouse and keyboard. Because mouse and keyboard is in many ways superior to a controller. You get much better camera control with the mouse. You have many more keybinds with the keyboard. Now, some people will talk about movement as if we move purely using the keyboard. No, we don't move purely using the keyboard. We move using the keyboard and the mouse because we press a button to move, and then we aim, or we look where we're going to move. This can cause issues. There are some benefits. I'm not going to deny it to controller, but I do actually consider the controller the worst option to play any game, really, with. Yeah, any game. It doesn't matter if it's Elden Ring, or a racing game, or a flight simulator. Like, if you're playing a racing game, a driving wheel is the vastly superior option. If you're playing a flight simulator, joystick is the vastly superior option. What game would have a controller being better than other options? Or if you're playing a fighting game, a pure fighting game, a fight stick exists. Again, there are dedicated options for every single type of game that are better than a controller. What really a controller is, it's a middle ground between a lot of options. It's a compromise between other options. How could it ever really hope to beat any other option unless those other options are poorly implemented? Now, there are poor implementations of mouse and keyboard in Dark Souls games. In this one, it's the mouse sensitivity and the default controls. You need to do a customization, and even then you don't get the options you really want. Why do I have to press a combination of keys to switch to a two-handed grip when we had the dedicated keybind to that before? Sure, they gave us a dedicated jump button this time around as opposed to a dedicated two-handed grip button. And not that I care much about the two-handed grip anyway, but I do have to use a weird combination of keys. But it's jarring because I can tell you, I have a lot of buttons on the mouse and keyboard. I can use those. I have side buttons on the mouse. I have a bunch of buttons on the keyboard. I used to play World of Warcraft with 30 keybinds. You think I can't imagine an extra key or 2 or 4 or 5 or even 10 compared to what I'm already using in Elden Ring? No, they just don't care. They really don't care as a developer, and the effort they've put on these PC versions has always been low effort. Here it's the performance that really drags it on. We get a lot of stuttering. Beyond the poor FPS, we also get a lot of stuttering. Like, beyond the issue of controls and poor FPS, the stuttering issue is the major problem of this game. See, the game uses DirectX 12, according to the guys at Digital Foundry, so it's using caching for a lot of things. So every time you meet a new enemy, see a new attack, a new spell, etc., the game is saving that in the cache. Now, this is technically to improve performance further down the line. Okay, all well and good, but the problem is you're going to get really piss poor performance when you encounter anything new. And this is fine if you keep the game installed and don't get a new computer or a new hard drive to install it on. And the performance that you're getting will improve the more you play, but that initial performance is going to be really terrible because you're going to get FPS drops, not just below 40, and you can get FPS drops in the 40s area just playing the game normally, even with a lot of caching, but you might get performance drops to 30, maybe even below, depending on your rig. And keep in mind, I have a pretty powerful computer, an i7 9700K, 32 gigs of RAM, and an RTX 2080 Super. Really powerful computer. Not the 3000 series, good luck buying one of those and not costing you an arm and a leg. But still a very powerful computer. It is laughable to think that the developers at Namco Bandai actually is saying, oh, we'll add ray tracing. Yeah, if the current performance of the game is anything to go by, your ray tracing performance will be utter shit. Hopefully they do actually improve on mouse issues, mouse sensitivity issues, on the prompt issue where, you know, like most games, it should automatically switch between mouse and keyboard prompts and controller prompts. But hey, thankfully we at least have mouse and keyboard prompts this time around. Though to be fair, they added those in Sekiro, and they did have them in the Dark Souls 1 Remastered Edition. But Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3 did not launch with mouse and keyboard prompts. So hey, progress, I suppose. Maybe next one will have automatic switching and actually good performance and a mouse sensitivity that isn't terrible. One can dream, right? But then there's another issue. This game uses HDR. Okay, we have an HDR mode. Works fine, looks fine, but here's the issue. You need to be in full screen mode to use it. What's the problem with that? Well, the problem is if you have dual monitors and you're moving the mouse around, you might end up with your mouse cursor on the other screen, to the right or left, depending on where your second monitor is and how you've set it up. And you might accidentally click and leave the game. And doing that in the full screen dedicated mode is gonna create a lot of headaches for you as a player. I personally record a lot. If I left full screen mode, that would be a painful experience for me when I'm trying to record the video in this game. And so I have to constantly watch my second monitor to be sure that my mouse is not moving there. It doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes when I launch the game, the mouse does have a tendency to do that. It wouldn't be a problem if I could play the game with HDR on in borderless mode, in windowed mode, but I can't play with HDR on in that mode. So another issue with the PC performance. I'd really take a lot of points from this game purely on PC performance aspect, because if I'm encountering these kind of performance issues on a pretty high-end computer, someone with a less powerful computer, they're gonna encounter significantly more issues. And I've actually gotten quite a lot of comments from people talking about this particular problem. This isn't something to be brushed aside. This is a major issue, and it continues the tradition of a developer and a publisher that haven't given a shit about the PC version of their game pretty much ever to properly implement it. And it's 2022. This is not 2010. This is not the age of crappy PC versions. Developers put an effort. Look at what Sony did with God of War, minus the memory leak, which was a major problem. Don't get me wrong. And I criticized them heavily in my videos for that. But minus that issue, which they've improved upon, that game was a really superior, vastly superior PC version than this one is. Better controls, better controller setup. I only had to change, 1-2 binds in God of War. Better performance. I can run God of War on max settings, granted with DLSS on, but I can get over 100 FPS in God of War. I struggled to get 50 in many areas in Elden Ring. So yeah, giving this game a 90 score like PC Gamer did or other people have done is not deserved when you're looking at the PC version. But reviewers don't care, right? They want to hype up a game, they want to reward the game, they want to say that the game lived up to its hype. The sad part is, when I'm talking about all of this, the game is in many ways an excellent title. It does improve on a lot of things that Dark Souls did. And it is, in my view, the true successor, the true sequel of Dark Souls 1. And that's really the shame of all of it when you think about it, because we have an excellent game, but it has a crappy PC version that in quite a few ways can be unbearable to play with mouse and keyboard and does have major performance problems. But what do I mean by the true sequel of Dark Souls 1? Well, Dark Souls 1 was an amazing game. It had a great atmosphere, great story, story universe more like atmosphere, characters like Solaire, for instance, is one of the most memorable characters in gaming. And it had really remarkable moments. And moments when you entered Dan Orlando or rang the bells or some other things that really stuck with you as a gamer. As you were going through the dungeons, exploring this dying world, finding out secrets, finding out what had happened, dealing with the bosses, dealing with these gods that had fallen from grace, really. It was an amazing journey. The problem with Dark Souls is what followed after that. Dark Souls 1 was not the perfect game. It had a lot of issues, performance issues, design issues. It felt clunky in quite a few ways. And trying to play the remastered version, not a great experience. It hasn't necessarily aged well as a game. I wish I could say is the best game in the series, but quite frankly, the clunkiness of all of it and the major problems it still does have to the same terms of performance optimization and really just aging badly drag it down. Then we have Dark Souls 2. Dark Souls 2 is an improvement in terms of controls, in terms of gameplay, in terms of how it feels. Like, I prefer playing Dark Souls 2 in many ways compared to Dark Souls 1 or even 3. I know I'm saying high heresy giving praise to Dark Souls 2, which is considered the worst in the series, but Dark Souls 2, in terms of combat, in terms of gameplay, in terms of boss design, felt a lot better in a lot of ways. It was an improvement over Dark Souls 1. People complain it wasn't as difficult, but honestly, by that point, we had learned a lot. And it didn't have the bullshit difficulty elements that would follow in its aftermath. But what dragged Dark Souls 2 from reaching the heights of 1? Well, lack of atmosphere. It feels bland and forgettable compared to Dark Souls 1. The areas are not that as memorable. The characters are not as great. Sure, I like Lucadil and I like I like Vendrick and his story, but I can't say I remember many of the characters of Dark Souls 2 or many of the areas, whereas I remember pretty much every single major area that I went through in Dark Souls 1. So it's not as memorable, it's not as good, and what it suffered from was the world design issue. See, Dark Souls 1 was a vast world, but it was also interconnected, vertical, a lot of verticality. And when you look at maps of the world of Dark Souls 1, you can see that it actually has a logical sense that if you're going underground, you are underground. If you're going upstairs, you are upstairs. Dark Souls 2 doesn't make sense. It's a bunch of long corridors like a dungeon, but it feels less appealing because of it. Sadly, that brought down Dark Souls 2 in the opinion of a lot of people. And I have to say, I want to like Dark Souls 2. I want to replay it again. I've tried, however. I could finish Dark Souls 1 again. It wouldn't be the best experience of my life right now, but I could finish it and I would be fine with it. I can do that in Dark Souls 3. Dark Souls 2, replayability is a major problem right now. It just drags on too long. And the dungeons and locations just get boring and bland and forgettable. It's just not that great of an experience. Even with the Scholar of the First Sin, which was supposed to improve on that, I just felt that they added a lot of frustrating elements to amp the difficulty, because that's one of the things people complain about. Oh, it's too easy, so it's like, let's add in a bullshit level of challenge, and that's exactly what they did in Dark Souls 2 with Scholar of the First Sin, the paid version. Remember this, we paid for this, and it just didn't feel that great with it. That's what dragged down. But overall gameplay, it was a continuation of Dark Souls 1. You could do a heavy melee build and you would be just fine. Heavy melee build, heavy armor, heavy shield. You could be slow and ponderous and pretty much beat the entire game. No problemo. Same in Dark Souls 1. But then came Dark Souls 3. Why don't I think the world of Dark Souls 3? Well, it did add a lot of verticality back in the series, sure. It did have difficult boss fights. It had better graphics and control scheme, but what was its issue? It was just boring as dirt as far as I see it. It was trying to pay homage, but it was already repeating itself, like the characters, the universe, the things we were dealing with. It isn't as memorable as either Dark Souls 1 or even 2, honestly. And Dark Souls 2 was already less memorable than Dark Souls 1. So it's paying homage, it's using the nostalgia factor in its own right, but things overall were less memorable. Dark Souls 1, very memorable. Parts of Dark Souls 2 can be memorable. Dark Souls 3, not really. I mean, Dark Souls 3 is the only game in the series where I didn't finish all the DLCs. I did that in Dark Souls 2. I did Artorias of the Abyss. That was actually my first playthrough because I started playing the series on PC. I played all the DLCs in Dark Souls 2. I enjoyed them quite a great deal. Then I played Dark Souls 3. I did a full run, the New Game Plus run, and a run of the first DLC pack, and that was it. And I was really disappointed by that first DLC pack, by the number of bosses, by the design of the area. Like, it felt with Dark Souls 3 that they had taken the complaints of Dark Souls 2, but had gone over too hard. Like, they added in a lot of verticality, and the world made more sense, but the areas just felt smaller and more condensed and not as interesting, really. That was my opinion. And the bigger problem I had with Dark Souls 3 is the legacy of Bloodborne. Bloodborne is a game that isn't about slow, ponderous, melee-focused combat, right? I mean, it is about melee-focused combat, but it's not about heavily armored combat with a shield. And with Dark Souls 3, they took a lot of gameplay elements from Bloodborne and made bosses in such a way, and made melee combat in such a way that if you played with a heavy melee build, or melee build in general, you would end up getting crushed. This was really the point where I genuinely started getting frustrated with the series because of the heavy focus on, or the cheese builds. Basically, a magic user would smash the hell out of even the most difficult bosses in the game, whereas a melee build, you just wipe and wipe and wipe and wipe. And it's one thing to die a lot because of your mistakes, but it is really frustrating to die to bullshit attacks. And also know that the only alternative that makes it easy is to go for a full-on magic build. That was frustrating. The Nameless King is a particular example of this. Now, there are always tools in Dark Souls and Elden Ring to overcome that, but the only tool I had available really felt to me like either go with a magic build of some description, or some cheese build, some ridiculous cheese build that wasn't exactly what I wanted, or someone to do the boss for you. That was my frustration. I didn't encounter too many annoying difficult bosses. Many of them were fair, but there were some bullshit fights that genuinely frustrated me in Dark Souls 3. And for me, Dark Souls 3, yes, it's the best on a technical level. Yes, it has the best controls. Yes, it does a lot of things right, but it was not as great because they kind of ruined melee combat in Dark Souls 3 in a lot of ways, or they adapted a bullshit boss difficulty design with that game that made it far less enjoyable. But this brings me to Elden Ring. Now, is the bullshit boss difficulty level still present in this game? Well, bosses do have very powerful attacks and they can one-shot you in many ways, but there's always a lot of tools. There's always been a lot of tools. What the Elden Ring does well is it takes many of the good elements of all of these games and combines them together. It has the great universe and immersive universe that Dark Souls 1 had. It has a great atmosphere. And it is a lot fairer for all builds of all descriptions. You want to play with a heavy melee build and beat the game through using that? You have that available. It will work. Shockingly, it will work, and it will work quite well. Sure, you still have the bullshit one-shot magical builds, but they don't feel quite as mandatory as they did in, say, Dark Souls 3. That is a vast improvement. I can beat this entire game with a melee build. Sure, I might be using bleed and frostbite weapons or poison weapons, but it works. Right, it works a lot better, and I'm dodge rolling a lot. I might be playing a bit of a glass cannon with, or a guy with heavy armor and a lot of HP to avoid the one-shot mechanics, but it does work, and I think it's because of the tools that they give you. The ashes help you a lot as a melee character. The way they've decided to handle armor in this game also helps with that, because in previous games you could upgrade your armor. In this game you can't upgrade your armor, so I think they designed the game around the idea that people aren't just going to fully upgrade their armor. They do expect people to upgrade their weapons, and that's a part of the difficulty, or to get better and better armors. But in quite a few ways it feels fair, and it feels less frustrating. Sure, people may complain about Melania or Radahn or other places, but there are ways to overcome those bosses that don't involve complete bullshit cheese. I mean, the bullshit cheese does exist. I've even used it myself to an extent, but compared to Dark Souls 3, it doesn't feel anywhere near as frustrating or annoying to play Elden Ring. It feels fairer. It feels like a better difficulty curve. The game starts out pretty easily. If you're a veteran of the series, you will find the initial area of Limgrave to be a joke. For new players, it's a great opportunity to learn, but the difficulty ramps up, but it does so in a very natural way. One of the issues I have with a lot of games is that the difficulty is inverted. You start off with a very difficult start. Even Dark Souls 1 had this issue. The initial area of Dark Souls 1, especially if you're a new player, is the hardest area in the fucking game. Until you unlock all the tools, weapon upgrades, spells, and all that can make the end game a complete breeze. But Elden Ring is exactly the opposite. You start off weak, but the enemies are also weak, and they present an appropriate challenge for your level. Sure, there are ways to cheese it, make it completely trivial if you know what you're doing, but when you're starting your first playthrough, and this is something that does matter, when you're starting your first playthrough, you're exploring and figuring things out, it is an appropriate challenge level for what you're given and what you know. And that's great. That's what Elden Ring does so very well. And yes, the difficulty ramps up. And yes, you may want to use cheese builds later down the line. But for me personally, overcoming the challenges in this game, there are a few points where I felt frustrated, where I just wanted to smash my keyboard. There are many points in Dark Souls 3 where that happened. The one point is the Divine Tower in Lernia. When you go there and you get this guy who teleports around, and he's a complete bullshit difficulty because of that teleportation, his spells and his ranged abilities. That was the only moment where I actually raged hard at this game. But outside of that, it felt reasonable. I mean, even someone like Radahn, think of Radahn. He's a boss that can literally one-shot you, but he's designed, the fight itself gives you the tool to do that. Now, some people may have issues with it, but this is clearly a fight where you do summon an army of NPCs to take out one of the most powerful beings in this universe, and the game makes a point. It just reinforces who Radahn is. And actually, one of the things to say about Elden Ring and the Soul series in general is I feel they do difficulty. For any complaints I may have about 1, 2, or 3, or Elden Ring in terms of difficulty, they do difficulty a lot better than pretty much every game that I've ever played that may have multiple difficulty levels. Because if you play a game with multiple difficulty levels, what I generally feel as a player, be it Total War, Witcher 3, Dragon Age, Mass Effect, any game really, any game I can think of, Modern Warfare, you can name any genre, any game, what I generally feel as a player is the highest difficulty requires bullshit cheese or you're gonna get destroyed, and the lower difficulties are trivial in many ways. Elden Ring is smoother. Dark Souls is smoother in general. It makes you work for it. It makes you put effort, but it rewards you for putting effort. Whereas if I'm playing something like Total War, I have to put a mountain of effort to even stand a chance. Or if I'm playing Mass Effect or Dragon Age, I have to get some of the best armors in the game to not be thrown on the floor. Or if I play The Witcher 3, I get smashed on the floor and one-shotted in some of the best gear available in the game. That doesn't happen in Elden Ring. Sure, you might get one-shotted in certain situations if you built your character improperly, if you ignored your HP bar completely, absolutely, and you're walking around naked. But if you put in the effort, if you get a proper gear set and you have a proper stat build, you will have a fair, reasonable challenge on your hands. And in point of fact, you will breeze your way, or you'll have a pretty decent time against virtually everything that the game throws at you. It feels rewarding. It feels like the effort that you're putting into learning the game, playing your character, is something that's rewarded. Not necessarily in every case. There are some bullshit challenges, but for most part, for moment-to-moment gameplay, that reward is tangible and it's there. And it makes the overall experience better. When I play a lot of games that have difficulty levels, I just genuinely feel frustrated most of the time. Like, one of the issues with, say, World of Warcraft, a game I've poured in hundreds of days played. Days, yes, days. A game I've poured in so much time. I liked World of Warcraft the best when it only had one rating difficulty, because adding multiple rating difficulties just added a bullshit level of challenge to it, from my perspective. And I've always had this issue with games with difficulty levels. I don't think difficulty levels work that well. This is in response to claims that, oh, this game is too difficult. No, it's not too difficult. In many ways, it's quite a bit easy because you have ways to cheese. You have ways to one-shot bosses. Like, difficult? Elden Ring? Really? I mean, when I can summon an army of NPCs to take one of the hardest bosses in the game down, when I can kill entire bosses with bleed and frostbite, where I can trick the AI and all that, difficult? Yeah. Let's talk about difficult in Witcher 3 when you get one-shot by a drowner. That's bullshit difficulty. But it is minimalistic. It isn't giving you all the information that you want. And this brings up a crucial point about Elden Ring and the Soul series in general. And that point is about community. Elden Ring doesn't give you all the information available. Or it's fairly obtuse when it comes to information. Story-wise, gear-wise, gameplay-wise, quest-wise, you might miss a lot of things if you're just playing on your own. Some people might feel frustrated. There are some game developers that are actually annoyed by how much praise Elden Ring is getting, despite the fact that it's very obtuse with the information. But here's the thing. This is actually the genius, in a way, of Miyazaki. And I'm not sure how much of it was intentional, but they've certainly, by this point, embraced this philosophy. I believe so, at the very least. See, the game is obtuse. It doesn't contain all the information, or all the information that you want. It can be difficult to find. But what are people going to do in this day and age when they can't find the information, or that information is not readily available in the game? Oh yeah, they're going to ask someone. They're going to go on the internet. They're going to go on social media. They're going to go on forums and wikis and all that. That's what they're going to do, or YouTube videos. And do you know what that does? It creates a sense of community. It brings people together. It makes people interact. In fact, this game has a much better social aspect than, say, World of Warcraft, where you literally play with other people. It has a much better social community aspect, purely on the fact that you have all the messages people leave on the ground, and you see the bloodstains, you see their ghosts. So you see what other people are doing if you're playing online. Playing this game online is, I think, essential to making it work, because people leave a message, oh, there's a hidden door here, or there's a trap here, or there's an enemy here that will do this or do that, and you see the bloodstains, and you're wondering, wait, why have so many people died in Nokron on the, I don't know, the ceiling, the roofs? Why have so many people? And I was a bit flabbergasted by that, because there were so many bloodstains. Did so many people fall to their deaths, or were so many people under-leveled when they went there? Keep in mind, to get to that area, you have to kill one of the hardest bosses in the game, one of the big guys in the game. So it was a bit shocking to see it. Guess a lot of people fail jumping in this game, but I digress. The point is, this game is about community. It's reading what people say online. It's checking item descriptions, comment and giving commentary on that with other people. It's talking with other people. It's seeing what their ghosts are doing in game. It's about a community aspect, both in game and outside of the game. It's not, even if you don't summon someone in co-op, or you get invaded, or you invade them, or participate in combat co-op yourself, there's still a genuine and powerful sense of community. Playing this game offline, or any of the Souls games offline, I've done this in the past. I've played some of them. I played Dark Souls 1 Remastered offline, and I've played Dark Souls 3 Remastered, Dark Souls 3 offline, because I had hoped that would solve the micro stuttering. It didn't. And it was just a lesser experience. You want to play these games online because it really pushes that community effort, because it adds spice to it. And a game that pushes you to interact with people in any way, even if it's just leaving some messages, or watching their ghosts, or checking their bloodstains, or going to Reddit or social media or wikis to find the information you want to solve a quest, solve a problem in game, is going to have a much more powerful and lasting effect on you as a player. This is something World of Warcraft used to do very well, because before it destroyed any sense of community. You want to look at some of the biggest problems a lot of games have? They don't have a community. They don't have a sense of community. They're basically all solo player experiences. Everyone is in their own little world, and they don't have to interact with other players in any way, shape, or form. In Elden Ring, even if you're just reading messages in the game that people leave, or you're seeing their bloodstain, you are interacting with other people. And that is what makes this game and this series so much better, because creating that sense of a community is going to create an overall better experience for yourself as a player, in a far more memorable one. That's always been my view, and I think a lot of games get this wrong. I think a lot of developers don't understand this. Like the Ubisoft developers saying, oh, it's like you can turn off all the UI elements in an Assassin's Creed game. Yeah, we can, sure. But your game is clearly designed around having those UI elements, and no one's going to give a shit to do it, like, except some very hardcore players. And what's the point, anyway, of turning it off? What do you gain from turning it off? Whereas in a game like Elden Ring, having a minimalistic UI, or having quite a few elements missing, is a deliberate design decision by this point. Maybe it wasn't necessarily a deliberate design decision for this purpose, but clearly by this point, they recognize the power of the community that they've created, and the YouTube channels they've created, like Vatividia and others, because it brings people together and makes people hardened fans. This is the reason why so many people that get into Dark Souls, or the Souls series, and now Elden Ring, why they love these games so much. Because it's not just about your journey and your experience and your adventure. It's the cumulative experiences that an entire player base has, that you do share online. You do see people talking with one another, sharing their stories. And I think crucially, that's what Elden Ring really is about as a game, and what Dark Souls is about. It's about a journey, your journey, and how you go through it. Your journey of hardship, dealing with the encounters, the challenges, and overcoming them. Or quitting, if you so desire. But that's ultimately what makes this work. And this is what I feel games are about. It's the social aspect, the community aspect that makes it so powerful. One of the things that made World of Warcraft my favorite game of all time was exactly that community social aspect that Blizzard has screwed up over the years, but that's a different discussion, not here or there. But this is the main power of Elden Ring, and the fact that you are on a journey, but it's not a brain dead journey. It's a journey that you actually have to put some effort in. You do have to pay attention. Just because you have a lot of options to make things easy doesn't mean that it is easy by default. If you don't care, if you don't put effort, if you don't give a shit, it's not gonna be a cakewalk. It isn't a cakewalk. It's something earned. Now, some people will complain, oh, I just want some casual gaming. Sure, we all do want that at some points in time, but it's a much better experience when you do actually have to put an effort to achieve something than if it's just handed to you. I mean, I don't care about a McDonald's meal when I go buy it, right? How memorable is that of an experience? But I do care when I cook food for myself, because there's that element of putting in the effort to make something for yourself, as opposed to it being handed to you for nothing. And that's what I think Elden Ring does very well. It requires you to care for it to deliver you a good experience, a memorable experience. Is it worth playing? Absolutely. It's the best game in the Sword series, despite the crappy PC version. And I would heartily recommend it for everyone, really, to pick up and try. And see if you do enjoy this world created by George R. Martin and Miyazaki, both of which are very talented creators. It's a game that lived up to all the hype that they built around it. Crappy PC version or not, it is deserving of a lot of the praise that it is genuinely getting, because it's done a lot of things right. Questine here, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications. And I shall see you next time. If you do enjoy my content, please do support me via PayPal, Patreon, or for YouTube channel membership.